Welcome to this deep dive. We're going to be unraveling some really interesting connections between human behavior and biology and evolution.
That's right.
So get ready for some intriguing insights because we're going to be looking at Robert Sapolsky's The Trouble with Testosterone, which is a collection of essays.
Yeah, and he's got a great way of unpacking these complex scientific ideas
Right.
in a way that's really engaging for the reader.
He does. And, his expertise as a primatologist and neurobiologist really shines through in these essays.
does.
And, he starts off by cautioning us about the complexity of studying behavior's biological roots.
Yeah.
He emphasizes the dangers of misinterpreting or misusing these scientific findings, jumping to conclusions about things like aggression or personality types. It's really important to remember that biology is just one piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, and it's so easy to fall into the trap of biological determinism. Assuming that our genes dictate everything about us and that we have no control over our actions. Historically, this kind of thinking has been used to justify some pretty harmful ideas, especially regarding race and gender, and even learning disabilities like dyslexia.
It's a stark reminder that understanding biological factors responsibly is so crucial. We need to avoid using biology as a tool for blame or prejudice. Instead, let's use it to better understand how our genes interact with our environment and our experiences to shape who we are.
And that brings us to testosterone.
Oh,
Most people associate testosterone with aggression, picturing it as a sort of magic potion that turns people into these raging beasts.
oh yeah, that's such a common misconception.
It is, but Sapolsky effectively debunks this myth
Okay.
using this fascinating example of monkeys in a social hierarchy.
Okay.
He explains that if you give the third-ranking monkey extra testosterone, he doesn't suddenly attack everyone above him.
Oh, that's interesting.
Instead, the monkey only becomes more aggressive toward those below him in the hierarchy. So this tells us that testosterone doesn't create aggression out of thin air. It amplifies already existing patterns of aggression.
So rather than a switch that turns aggression on or off,
Exactly.
it's more like a volume knob,
Exactly.
increasing the intensity.
Yeah, and that's a really important distinction to make.
So this highlights the immense influence of environment and experience. Imagine the implications for understanding human aggression in various social situations.
For sure, and here's another thought-provoking detail. Even castrated males with a history of aggression can still exhibit that behavior in certain situations.
Really?
Yeah, this underscores that biology alone cannot explain the complexity of violence.
It makes you realize how deeply intertwined biology and experience are in shaping behavior.
Yeah.
We can't simply point to hormones as the sole cause of societal problems or look for simple solutions. We need to consider the broader context in which aggression arises.
Now let's shift gears and explore how people cope with stress. Sapolsky describes different coping mechanisms: passive, persistent, vigilant, hostile, and repressive. He particularly focuses on those with repressive personalities.
So those are the folks who deny feeling stress, but their bodies tell a different story.
Precisely.
Right.
Imagine these individuals are internally experiencing significant stress, yet they consciously deny it.
Wow.
The research that he presents is quite interesting. Physiologically, they resemble individuals who are highly anxious. Their bodies are pumping out these stress hormones like crazy.
So while they might think they have it all under control, their bodies are actually experiencing the strain.
Yeah,
That bottled up stress has to go somewhere, right?
it appears. So the studies that he discusses show that repressors exhibit similar levels of glucocorticoids, which are those key stress hormones, as highly anxious people. This raises concerns about the long-term impact on their health, particularly on their cardiovascular systems.
It suggests that denying stress might actually be more detrimental than acknowledging it and finding healthy ways to cope.
Yeah, and here's a surprising idea Sapolsky presents. Sometimes living in a world without perceived stressors can be the most stressful of all.
How can that be? Wouldn't a life without stressors be a good thing?
Well, consider this. If you are constantly suppressing any potential negative emotion to maintain a facade of being stress-free, it becomes incredibly taxing.
It's almost like running a marathon just to stand still.
Exactly.
That makes you realize that building resilience to stress isn't just about avoiding difficult situations. It's about learning to regulate our emotions effectively.
Now let's explore another intriguing aspect of human behavior, the pull of novelty.
Okay.
Sapolsky highlights how primates, including humans, are innately driven to explore the unknown. He uses examples of young baboons and chimpanzees leaving their familiar groups.
Seeking new territories and mates and experiences, It's fascinating how, despite the risks involved, this behavior is crucial for genetic diversity and the survival of the species.
It speaks to this biological imperative to push boundaries and embrace new possibilities.
No.
Think about our own human experiences, leaving home for college or traveling to new countries.
Or even just trying that new restaurant down the street.
Exactly. It all echoes that primal drive to seek out novelty.
It's that inherent curiosity about what lies beyond the familiar. Now, Sapolsky takes this a step further and introduces this concept of partial westernization and its impact on health. He shares the story of Joseph Odhiambo, who's a Kenyan hotel manager who develops severe hypertension.
Yeah, this case study reveals the potential health consequences of a rapid shift in environment and lifestyle. Odhiambo finds himself navigating a clash of cultures, lacking the traditional coping mechanisms to deal with the stress of his westernized job. It's as though his body is still operating with traditional software in a modern, fast-paced world.
And that mismatch can take a toll.
It can.
It reminds us that our biology is adapted to a specific environment, and when that environment changes too rapidly, it can lead to a disconnect.
Right.
It's like trying to fit a square peg into a round hole.
And this leads us to the fascinating world of zoopharmacognosy. The idea that animals utilize plants for medicinal purposes.
Sapolsky gives the example of chimpanzees eating aspelia leaves, which some researchers believe may have anti-parasitic properties.
He presents both sides of the argument,
Okay.
acknowledging the difficulty of proving self-medication in animals and offering alternative explanations. Perhaps the leaves have certain physical properties that aid digestion, or maybe the chimps simply learn this behavior from observing others.
But imagine the potential implications if we could definitively prove that animals self-medicate.
It would be huge.
It could open up a whole new realm of possibilities for discovering new drugs and treatments for human diseases.
Nature is a vast and untapped resource, and who knows what secrets it holds.
Right.
Sapolsky then takes us into a thought-provoking discussion about the connection between obsessive-compulsive disorder, or OCD, and religious practices. He draws parallels between the rituals common in OCD, like those focused on cleansing or checking or counting, and the structured rituals we see in many religions. He even suggests that some religious rituals might have originated from individuals with OCD.
Wow.
It's a bold proposition, and Sapolsky acknowledges the sensitivity surrounding this topic, emphasizing respect for both religious beliefs and individuals struggling with OCD. He even connects it back to Skinner's concept of superstitious conditioning, where random reinforcement can create rituals even when there's no actual connection between the action and the outcome.
This is where things get really interesting. It makes you wonder if our brains are wired to seek patterns even when they don't exist. Could that explain the development of certain rituals, both in religious contexts and in individuals with OCD?
It's certainly a fascinating possibility, prompting us to consider the origins of beliefs and behaviors.
This deep dive into the trouble with testosterone has been incredibly insightful so far, and we've just scratched the surface. Stay tuned as we continue our exploration in Part 2, where we'll delve into even more mind-bending ideas. It's remarkable how our brains are wired to connect the dots, even if we sometimes draw lines between things that are completely unrelated.
It's like we crave meaning and order even in the face of randomness. And Sapolsky takes us down this intriguing path as he explores the ways we perceive guilt and innocence, sometimes in distorted ways. He uses the example of firing squads.
Firing squads, what do those have to do with guilt and innocence?
Well, think about it. If 5 people shoot at a prisoner and all 5 bullets are needed to deliver the fatal blow, each person can convince themselves they're only responsible for 1/5 of a death.
It's a way to fractionate guilt, to create emotional distance from the act. It makes you wonder if this relates to the bystander effect. The more people involved, the less personal responsibility each individual feels.
It's fascinating how the mind works to protect itself from discomfort. And Sapolsky links this to the work of psychologists like Tversky and Kahneman, who studied these cognitive biases in decision-making.
Right. Their research showed how we tend to frame things in ways that minimize risk or discomfort, even if it means distorting reality. So when it comes to guilt, we seek ways to downplay our role to make it feel less impactful.
But here's the interesting contrast. They also found that we tend to view good deeds in a more absolute way. Saving one life feels more concrete, more significant than contributing to saving a fraction of a life.
So it's easier to emotionally connect with a single identifiable person than with a statistical probability. That's why charities often highlight individual stories rather than presenting overwhelming statistics. It taps into that innate human empathy.
It's a powerful way to engage people.
Yeah.
Now, shifting gears, Sapolsky explores the biological basis of wanderlust, drawing this fascinating comparison between humans and baboons. He points out how young males in both species feel this irresistible urge to leave their familiar surroundings and explore the unknown.
It's like that innate drive to push boundaries and seek out new experiences is deeply ingrained in our biology. But it's also a risky behavior, right? Leaving the safety of the known exposes you to potential dangers.
Absolutely. There are predators, competition for resources, all sorts of challenges. But from an evolutionary perspective, this wanderlust is crucial. It prevents inbreeding and helps spread genes over a wider area, increasing the chances of survival for the species.
It makes you wonder, who are those first brave souls who dared to venture into uncharted territories, crossing mountains, navigating oceans, settling new lands?
And Sapolsky emphasizes that humans, with our adaptable diets, have become one of the most widely dispersed species on Earth.
Yeah.
That drive to explore played a major role in our success.
But it's not just about physical exploration, is it? It's also about that intellectual curiosity, that thirst for knowledge that drives us to learn new things, to challenge existing ideas, to expand our understanding of the world.
It's that spark that fuels innovation and progress, both individually and as a society. Now, Sapolsky takes us into a somewhat unsettling realm, the idea that our bodies bear the imprint of our experiences, the stresses we've endured, and even the socioeconomic conditions we've lived in.
He dives into this in his essay, Poverty's Remains, where he discusses how medical science for a long time relied heavily on cadavers from the poor to study human anatomy.
And this skewed our understanding of what a normal body looks like, because the bodies of the poor were often marked by malnutrition and disease, and the constant stress of living in poverty. It's like looking at a tree that's been battered by storms and assuming that's how all trees should look.
He gives this shocking example of how doctors misdiagnosed a condition called idiopathic adrenal atrophy simply because they were used to seeing enlarged adrenal glands in cadavers from the poor whose bodies were constantly flooded with stress hormones.
They mistook a stressed adrenal gland for a normal one.
And even more tragically, this reliance on cadavers from the poor led to a misunderstanding of the size of the thymus gland, which played a role in the misdiagnosis and harmful treatment of sudden infant death syndrome.
Wow.
It's a stark reminder that scientific knowledge can be influenced by social factors, and that even well-intentioned research can have unintended consequences. We must constantly question our assumptions and look for ways to ensure our research reflects the full spectrum of human experience.
Now let's shift our focus to Sapolsky's essay, Junk Food Monkeys. He tells the fascinating story of a baboon troop that discovers a garbage dump in a Kenyan game park.
It's like they stumble upon a primate paradise filled with high-calorie processed foods, custard pudding, potato chips, all the treats they could ever want.
Initially, it seems like they're thriving. The young baboons grow faster, reach puberty earlier, and the females produce more offspring.
But as we often see with these tales of sudden abundance, there's a dark side.
Indeed, their cholesterol levels skyrocket. Their insulin levels become chronically elevated, and they become more susceptible to infectious diseases. They're experiencing the same health consequences of a Western diet that we see in humans.
It highlights the disconnect between our evolutionary history and our modern lifestyles. Our bodies are adapted to a diet based on scarcity, and this sudden influx of processed food and sugar overwhelms our systems.
It's a cautionary tale reminding us to pay attention to the long-term consequences of our dietary choices. Now, Sapolsky shifts gears once again, exploring the idea that our perceptions of normal behavior are heavily influenced by cultural norms and expectations.
He uses the example of aging male baboons who sometimes leave their original troop and join a new one. It's almost as if they've outlived their usefulness in the eyes of the younger generation.
Exactly. The dominant males in their original troop often treat them poorly once they're past their prime. It raises questions about how we view and treat aging in our own societies.
In many cultures, aging is associated with decline and irrelevance. But in others, elders are revered for their wisdom and experience. It makes you wonder how these differing perspectives shape our individual experiences of aging.
Sapolsky also discusses research on the differences in social networks between men and women as they age. Women tend to have more close friends and social connections, which seems to offer protection against the stresses of aging.
Whereas men in many Western societies are often raised to be more independent, less emotionally expressive, and less likely to cultivate those kinds of deep supportive relationships.
And this can lead to greater vulnerability to isolation and loneliness as they get older. It highlights how social structures impact our well-being throughout our lives. Now prepare for a mind-bending journey as Sapolsky delves into the very concept of self-questioning, how our sense of identity can be both fluid and fragmented.
He discusses split-brain patients, individuals who've had the connection between the two hemispheres of their brain severed. This raises fascinating questions about consciousness. If the two hemispheres can function independently to some degree, does that imply two separate consciousnesses residing within one brain?
It's a question that challenges our understanding of what it means to be a single unified self. While most scientists reject the idea of two distinct selves in split-brain patients, it does make us reconsider the nature of consciousness.
It makes you wonder if at some level we are all composed of a multitude of impulses and desires held together by this fragile sense of coherence. And Sapolsky also touches on multiple personality disorder, where individuals exhibit entirely distinct personalities that seem to control their behavior at different times.
He acknowledges the controversy surrounding this diagnosis, but it further complicates our understanding of the boundaries of self. And then he brings in Freud's concept of melancholia or major depression, where individuals turn their grief and anger inwards almost as if they've internalized the lost person and are battling with them internally.
It's as if the self becomes a battleground for unresolved emotions and conflicts. And to add another layer, Sapolsky shares a personal anecdote about his own experience with grief after his father's death. He felt as though he had incorporated his father's heart into his own body.
It's a poignant illustration of how grief can blur the lines between self and other, how we carry the legacy of those we've lost within us. It speaks to the interconnectedness of human experience, how our sense of self is molded by our relationships.
Now let's dive into some heavy science as Sapolsky explores the world of cytokines, those chemical messengers that play a vital role in the immune system.
He explains that cytokines don't just fight off infections, they also have powerful effects on the brain behavior and our overall sense of well-being. He uses the example of interleukin-1 or IL-1, known to cause fever fatigue and even depression-like symptoms.
It's like these immune system messengers are also having a party in our brains, and not always a fun one.
And this explains why we often feel so awful when we're sick. It's not just the pathogen itself, but also our body's immune response that's making us miserable. It's like we're caught in the crossfire of a battle being waged within us.
It also raises questions about whether fever-reducing drugs like aspirin might hinder our body's natural defenses.
It's a thought-provoking idea. If fever is a helpful response to infection, maybe sometimes it's best to let the body run its course and fight the invader on its own terms. It's a reminder that our bodies are incredibly complex, and what we perceive as negative symptoms might actually be part of a larger healing process. Now prepare for a fascinating and potentially controversial discussion as Sapolsky explores shamanism and the possible links between altered mental states and religious experiences.
He brings up the work of early 20th century anthropologists who suggested that shamans, these spiritual leaders in many indigenous cultures, might exhibit traits that in Western societies would be labeled as mental illness.
They were talking about hallucinations, trance states, altered perceptions of reality, experiences that don't fit neatly into our Western definitions of normalcy.
While modern anthropologists have largely rejected this idea, it does raise interesting questions about the relationship between extreme mental states and the development of religious beliefs and rituals.
And Sapolsky goes on to explore the prevalence of superstitious beliefs, even in modern Western societies. He cites a Gallup poll where a surprisingly high percentage of Americans admitted to believing in ghosts, telepathy, and even demonic possession.
It seems that even in our age of reason and science, the human mind still craves the mysterious and the unexplainable. We're drawn to the possibility that there might be more to reality than meets the eye.
And Sapolsky delves even deeper into this idea by revisiting the parallels between obsessive-compulsive disorder and religious rituals.
He points out that both individuals with OCD and religiously observant individuals often engage in elaborate rituals centered around cleansing, checking, counting, and other repetitive behaviors.
And he proposes this intriguing, if somewhat unsettling idea: could some religious rituals have originated with individuals who had OCD?
It's as if their private anxiety-reducing behaviors were woven into the fabric of their culture, becoming part of a shared belief system. And this connects back to Skinner's concept of superstitious conditioning. Perhaps random reinforcement played a role in solidifying these rituals, even if there's no actual connection between the behavior and the desired outcome.
It's a fascinating perspective, suggesting that even seemingly irrational behaviors can have deep-rooted biological and psychological underpinnings. Stay tuned as we continue our deep dive into the trouble with testosterone and uncover even more thought-provoking insights in Part 3.
Yeah, it really makes you think about the evolution of belief systems,
Yeah,
and how our biology and psychology and culture all intertwine to shape what we believe.
it really does. It's a testament to the complexity of the human mind.
Hmm.
We're capable of rational thought and scientific inquiry, yet we're also drawn to the mysterious, the unexplained, the things that defy easy categorization.
Exactly. So, as we wrap up our deep dive into the trouble with testosterone, what are some key takeaways that stand out to you? What insights from Sapolsky's work have resonated the most?
But one of the most powerful messages for me is that science, while incredibly valuable, doesn't have all the answers. And Sapolsky embraces that.
It seems like for every question science answers, it generates a dozen new ones,
Right.
each more intricate and thought provoking than the last.
Precisely. And those new questions
Yeah.
often lead us into uncharted territory, pushing the boundaries of what we thought we knew. It's a constant reminder that there's always more to discover.
He even quotes the geneticist J.B.S. Haldane, who said, "Life is not only stranger than we imagine, it is stranger than we can imagine."
Yeah, that quote perfectly captures the essence of scientific exploration. It's this never-ending journey of discovery, constantly revealing the vastness of what we don't yet understand.
And that sense of wonder, that insatiable curiosity is what fuels our desire to keep learning, to keep questioning, to keep pushing the boundaries of knowledge.
It is, and Sapolsky reminds us that science isn't about extinguishing our sense of awe, but about expanding it, deepening it, and letting it guide us towards a richer understanding of ourselves and the universe we inhabit.
So as we conclude this deep dive, we turn the focus to you. What threads from this exploration resonated with you? What surprised you or challenged your assumptions? What new perspectives did you gain about yourself, about human nature, about the world around you?
Hopefully, this journey through Sapolsky's work has left you with more questions than answers. You're questioning your assumptions about biology and behavior and belief. You're seeing the world through a more nuanced, more complex lens.
And maybe, just maybe, you're feeling a renewed sense of awe, a spark of curiosity, a desire to delve deeper into the mysteries that surround us.
So keep exploring, keep questioning, keep diving deep into the complexities of life. Embrace the unknown and let that sense of wonder be your guide.
Until next time, keep pondering those big questions, and we'll meet again for another deep dive into a new and fascinating topic.